from the Digital Media Center on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letts.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English. Ramping Up Your English is an instructional support program for intermediate level English learners. If you've already passed the beginning stages of learning English and you want to reach higher levels of English proficiency, this program is designed to meet your needs and get you closer to your goal. This is a bonus episode for viewers interested in our current content unit on Native Americans. It's my great pleasure to welcome back storyteller Thmoas Doty to episode B17 of Ramping Up Your English. Now, in our last bonus episode, we explored some of the history and culture of Native Americans that have lived in Southern Oregon and Northern California for thousands of years. This being the region where this program is produced. Well, we focus mostly on the time before contact with Europeans. Today's interview continues that conversation and carries it into the disastrous experience of the coming of white people. I welcome back Thmoas Doty to Ramping Up Your English.
Thank you so much.
So I'm very impressed with all of this research you've done, mostly to support your life work, I would say, as a storyteller. Mm-hmm. And in the process, you found out such a treasure trove of things about the Native Americans that lived in this area, particularly the Takelma. And one of the things that you get into, because I guess it's necessary for really telling their story, is the language. And even though you're not a linguist by training, there's all these elements of the language. And I understand there's something very special about the language that Takelma used.
Yeah, the Takelma language, which is in the process of being brought back, we hope so anyway. The Takelma language is unique in that it is its own language family. There are no other languages even related to Takelma. The languages around the area include languages from the Hokan family, the Lutamai, the Athabaskan, Algonquin. But Takelma is its own language, and it feels to me, and this is not as a professional linguist, but it just feels to me very old, and that the culture feels very old. And we have characters in the stories like Rock Old Woman. We have a dragonfly who is a culture bringer. Nowhere else do you find that anywhere in the country. Wow. It's just very, very unique in many ways, and yet also very West Coast and Oregon in other ways.
It surprised me when you said Algonquin. Uh-huh. I think of that as being in the Great Lakes area.
Well, I think the original Algonquins are pretty much what the Bronx is now.
Wow.
And as far as I know, the Yurok who speak Algonquin down at the mouth of the Klamath may be the only Algonquin speakers this side of the Mississippi. And within 100 miles of where we sit, there are all these different language families represented. These are not just different dialects of the same language. These are languages as different as English is to Mongolian. And so we have an incredible diversity of languages in this area, and Takelma being kind of unique in its family, unique in its approach, unique in its sound.
How did this work with all these people living in fairly close proximity and having such different languages?
Well, partly there was a lot of intermarriage between the tribes, mostly because if you're living in your village, everybody in your village is a little too closely related to you, and you want a lot of branches on your family tree, right?
Right.
And so there was a lot of intermarriage between villages, between tribes. And I use the word tribes in a modern sense. You know, back in the old days, there really were no tribes as we think of tribes today. They were linguistic groups in villages and communities. But that led to a lot of Native people being at least bilingual, if not trilingual. And in addition to knowing the local languages, there was also the Indian Sign Language, which was pretty universal across the country. Used a lot in trading, especially up at places like Celilo Falls up on Columbia, where many, many tribes from different areas, all speaking different languages, would gather. And then, of course, at some point, the Chinook jargon was developed, mostly at the time based on the Chinook language, the mouth of the Columbia River, with only a few, say, Chinook words that everybody learned. But then as the French-Canadian fur trappers came in, a lot of French words were added. Over a period of time with all those gatherings at Celilo, a lot of words from other native languages in the area were added to the Chinook jargon as well. So that was yet another way to communicate between tribes.
Now, in many of the tribes or groups of people, no matter what language they have, you see some of these characters in their mythology show up. And perhaps the best known is Coyote.
Oh, yes.
Tell me a little bit about Coyote.
We have more stories about Coyote than anybody else. Coyote is a trickster. He has a dual personality, a split personality. He's part fool. He's part kind of wise person as well. So buffoon and creator all rolled into one. And despite all of his foolishness, despite all of the crazy things, all the rules he breaks and everything, he always brings something of importance to the people, whether it's good sex or whether it's Crater Lake or tobacco, whatever it happens to be. We laugh at Coyote because he does all the things that we are not allowed to do, and it brings that out in the open. And like Coyote likes to say, who's going to teach the people what not to do by doing it? Right? And so in a sense, he's also very much part human. You know, he has all the characteristics of the animal coyote. He's a survivor. He has an incredible appetite for a lot of different things. But he's also very human in the sense that he has a lot of human capabilities in the stories, things that happen to him, and he responds in a very human way, which is why we can relate to all of the animal people in the stories, but especially Coyote, you know, coming from a whole different place as being human beings.
Now there's two aspects of his personality, and I can't help but my mind goes to duality. And balance.
Yes. Duality is very important in our Takelma culture in so many ways. For instance, there are only two directions in the story. Everything is either upriver or it's downriver. Upriver's to the east, rising sun, creation. Downriver's to the west, toward the setting sun and the land of the dead. And actually, if you ask Coyote how to get to the land of the dead, he'll tell you, I know where it is. It's to the west, beyond the sunset, across the river, always on the other side from where I am. You know?
In other words, he doesn't go there.
Right, that duality of direction, the duality of the Dragonfly brothers, which I think we'll talk about at some point, elder brother, younger brother, that duality as well. Dualities are so important in understanding our Takelma culture, and Coyote is the epitome of dualities.
And in the case of the Takelma, we'll go right now to the Dragonfly.
Okay.
And that relates, as I understand, to Table Rock. Both Table Rocks, I should say, both of them.
It does. So Dragonfly, or who we call Dal, again, there's the duality. He gets split into two brothers early on in the Dragonfly story. So there's Elder Dal and Younger Dal, the Dragonfly brothers. But even the word in the language, Dal, is a repetition of a single sound. So that duality is even in his name, right? And Dragonfly is sort of trickster and culture bringer all rolled into one. The Dragonfly brothers travel up the Rogue River, changing things, making the world ready for the arrival of the human people. And when they arrive at Tillameek, they establish that as the salmon ceremony place. And when they arrive at the Table Rocks, the place they're going to live their lives, they turn into the two Table Rocks. They arrive at that place, and they become the center of the Takelma world. And Elder Dal being Upper Table Rock, Younger Dal being Lower Table Rock. And so that's basically their story. And so it's really important, the things we learn from the Dragonfly brothers. Elder Dragonfly is the wise half of the trickster character. He's always getting his younger brother out of trouble. His younger brother is always saying, hey, big nose Dodo, look at this. You can stay there as a stick in the mud if you want to. I'm going to go do this. And then pretty soon you hear younger Dodo call, oh, elder brother, come and help me. You know, it's like.
So they're apt to be on adventures then.
Right. And so actually once they split into the two dragonflies, those two dragonflies each represent one half of the trickster character, the creator and the fool, the wise man, the buffoon. That split personality is represented in two characters.
Now, isn't that somewhat universal in mythology of embracing both?
Yes, it is. It's very important. And things went really downhill with Wile E. Coyote on Saturday morning. We think of him, people say, oh, that's like Wile E. Coyote, the trickster. I go, not really. Wile E. Coyote is not a true trickster. He's only got the fool half. He's only got the rule-breaking half. He never brings anything of importance to the people, right? So he's missing that other half, right? So, yeah.
So to pivot from there, the Dragonfly brothers are part of the Takelma world, and there's a description that should go with the Takelma world.
Yes, our Takelma world, you know, when we think of the world from our native point of view, we're thinking of our native world. So we think of there's one earth and many worlds, and our Takelma world is one of those native worlds. We look at our world as the great animal that is the world. And the lifeblood of that world is Kalam, or what we call the Rogue River. It's the lifeblood of that great animal. The head of the great animal is that big round Crater Lake, that big round head up there at the eastern part of our world. The neck of the great animal, what we call Gwyn Tagabak Danda, which means literally the nape of the earth, its neck. That's Boundary Springs, where the Rogue River starts up near up near Crater Lake. The ribs of the great animal, the center of the animal, the center of the universe are the two table rocks along the river. And then the rear end of the animal, that's Gold Beach. We call that Daitagayahumada, the rear end of the earth, its tail, and that's where the river flows into the ocean. Now, that's just a part of the story. That's kind of the static picture, but it's also very much alive and moving, like everything in our culture is very much alive. And so we see the lifeblood of the world. We see the river as a symbol of our lives. So up at Boundary Springs, with the river gushes out of the hillside and from 5 different springs, just really fast. It's a full-blown river, and it's like birth. Boom, you're in the world, right? And then like childhood, you are rushing down, that river's rushing down through the canyons out of control like childhood, down through the Rogue River Gorge, down through Takelma Gorge, ripping right along. And then as the river comes into its middle life, where it's going sometimes slow, sometimes fast, going along the, by the table rocks, the middle life of the river. And then as it comes toward the end of its life, as it comes toward the ocean, it kind of slows down and widens out a little bit, like some of us widen out a little bit as we get older, until it flows into the ocean at its death. But that's not the end of the story or the cycle, because out over the ocean, the clouds form that come back over the Cascade Mountains, that brings the rain and the snow, that feed the springs, that feeds the river, that keeps the great cycle of our lives and the cycle of the life of our world, the great animal that is the world, very much alive and in motion.
So that sounds like that completion.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And to me, it sounds like, to use a current term, sustainability.
That too, yes, exactly.
Because it just keeps us a cycle. Now, we've talked a lot about the mythology and now the physical world of the Takelma. Alas, it did not continue the way that it was when the first white people came in here. So you've dug a lot into the history and things. What can you tell us about that? Some of those first contacts with European.
Well, the first contacts with European people did not go so well. In some cases, Native people welcomed the Europeans with open arms, but in many cases, the Europeans who were seeing generally the Indians as inferior species, subhuman some kind, just basically started slaughtering the Indians, and the Indians would fight back, of course, and that gave way to a lot of the Indian wars, including the Rogue River War here in this valley. And that was a very terrible, terrible time. The Native people who are looking at their world in a certain way, looking at the world that everything is alive, everything has a spirit, and everything is in circles and cycles, you know, circle of the sun, the circle of the moon, the cycle of the seasons. We sit in a circle when we're telling the stories around the fire. We do our circle dances to honor that great bear and send the seasons through. And here are these people who show up and they start doing square dances. I mean, what is that all about, right? And they start building these towns and squares and city blocks, square buildings, and they play these games, chess, checkers on these square boards, right? And they get this stuff into their speech about straight lines, which are very meaningless to us Native people. Sit up straight, you know, give me the straight truth. He walks the straight and narrow way. Get all your ducks in a row, right? And only when they're thinking about somebody who doesn't look at the world that way, then they think about circles and they go, woo, right? They make a circle around the ear called the guy Looney Tunes. And so I think a lot of that whole idea of worldview and the association of everything being alive in the world and that non-ownership of the world, all of those things were in total contradiction to what the Europeans wanted. They were seeing history as a timeline, a straight line. You have all the dates along it. You got this arrow at the end, encouraging always to go ahead. Go west, young man, right? Where we see history in a circle. So in the wintertime, as we tell our stories around the circle, we tell all of our stories. We're constantly revisiting each of the stories, all the wonderful things that have happened to us for thousands of years, or even last weekend that get included in the mythology, and the terrible things as well. But when you're looking at history in that timeline, unless you're wise enough to keep looking behind you, you're destined to make a lot of the same mistakes over and over again. And so the Columbuses and the Hitlers, who have no idea that these people are incredibly spiritual people with a rich mythology, with a rich view of the world, a rich religious feeling about them, they see them as subhuman beings. And we keep repeating that over and over and over again. And yet that's not at all, of course, what the Native people are all about. So those things come into conflict. Native people are forced from their homelands where they've lived for thousands of years. Here in the Rogue Valley in 1856, there were 5 trails of tears that led out of the valley. Native people force marched up to the Siletz and Grand Ronde reservations up north, only able to carry, you know, take with them what they could carry on their backs. Sometimes families were split into different reservations. And you know, if you want to control a Native people, here's what you do. You rip them out of their homeland where they've been. You split up families. You give them substandard houses so they're always cold. You don't feed them quite enough food so they're always hungry. You tell them they're going to live in a community. You make all these promises you're going to live in a community, and yet that community is more like a concentration camp than anything else. You force them away from their homeland, where several Native people die from exposure to the elements along those walks. And several other Native people die of sadness. Imagine that. Dying of sadness because you're leaving your homeland. And when you get to the reservations, you're told you have to cut your hair to look like white people and wear white people's clothing, and you will be punished severely if you speak your language or tell your stories. The only reason I think we have some of these stories that survive is in some cases late at night on the reservation, the Native people would gather in the shadows where it's hard to see them. And with quiet voices and with small gestures you couldn't see from a distance, they'd whisper the stories to each other night after night after night, because they knew just how important it was to keep the stories alive, because everything is passed along through the stories. Our history, our folklore, everything we believe in. And it's because of people like that we even have our stories today.
And one of those people is going to be shown in a moment. She's one of the storytellers that, as I understand it, worked with some of the people who came later, like ethnologists and linguists. Can you tell me about her?
This is Gwisquishan. This is our Takelma elder Aggie Baker of Pilgrim's great aunt. Gwisquishan was the last fluent speaker of Takelma. She died in 1934. This is shortly before her death. It was Gwisquishan who was an incredible storyteller. As a young girl, she walked the Trail of Tears, and she ended up at Siletz. And then in 1906, Edward Sapir, a famous linguist and anthropologist, interviewed her, saved a lot of the stories which he published, did an incredible study of the language, which is probably the only reason we're going to be able to bring the language back. He described her in 1906 as ancient. Well, in 1933, 25 years later, John Harrington, another linguist and anthropologist, drove Gwisquishan, Frances Johnson was her English name, back to the Rogue Valley. And they drove around the Rogue Valley to all the places the stories come from. And out of that came 1,500 pages of field notes that are still unpublished, but I've made a lot of use of over the years. But she was an amazing storyteller, and yeah, every time I tell stories, I give thanks to the ancestors, to people like Gwisquishan, to all of the generations of storytellers before her, to those storytellers who whispered the stories during the dark years in our history on the reservations. Giving thanks that they kept these stories alive so we can enjoy them today, that we can learn from them, because all the wisdom is passed through the stories. And I always feel very honored to be part of this living tradition that also has such an ancient history.
Are we seeing a bit of a renaissance of some of the Native American cultures today?
Yeah, we are. We are seeing that. We are seeing more and more languages come back. So languages we thought were going to be lost forever are now being brought back. Athabascan became kind of the language of choice at the Siletz Reservation, is now being taught at Siletz School. There's classes in conversational Athabascan, and that's happening a lot. And because as the language comes back and the elders begin to talk more and the younger people are listening and very interested in what's going on with their culture, wanting to know more about the culture, we're seeing more and more of the cultural traditions come back as well. So bit by bit, a lot has been lost. Many, many stories that will never be recovered. Some wisdom that may never be recovered as well. But what we do have is coming back, and Native people are embracing their identity as a people who have been here a long time and know how to live here in a healthy way. And from that, we have a lot to learn.
And we have an image here that we'll bring up again on the screen. But as I understand it, part of this, what's going on right now, is a restoration of the salmon ceremony there.
Yeah, Grandma Aggie brought the salmon ceremony back in 1990s. We first brought it back to the Applegate River because the land at Tillameek, the traditional land, wasn't available at the time. And the ceremony was done out there for many, many years. And then when this land became available in 2007, we got together and planned out bringing the ceremony back to its original place at Tillameek. And that happened in 2007. And the ceremony was done for a number of years. We haven't done a ceremony in the last couple of years. Aggie is now 95. Not sure how much longer she can do the salmon ceremony, or whether it's time to pass this along to a new keeper of the salmon ceremony. But we're also looking at trying to put together a ceremony that really addresses the original intentions of the old time ceremony. That really invites the salmon people to come back and to apologize to them for all the stuff that has happened to their species and all the stuff we human beings have done to the river, and to invite them to come back up the river and join us in reciprocity. And if doing this ceremony the next time we do it, no salmon show up, well, that's a teachable moment, right? And we apologize, and then we do a prayer, and we come back the next year, and we do it all over again. If no salmon show up, we come back the next year, and we do it all over again until the salmon people hear us, and they come back as well, and everything is restored. You know, one definition of a hero in mythology is someone who strives against great odds with very little hope of success. And that's what we're going to do, because each gesture, us coming back and saying, we're sorry, we're back, come back and join us. Each gesture becomes a sacred gesture, and each of those small gestures is what changes the world.
So it's almost an understatement to say it makes a difference.
It does make a difference, yeah. In one person, one gesture makes a difference.
Sorry that we're out of time, but we are. I want viewers to be able to see your website, because it is so rich. It's a treasure trove of the things that you have discovered. So let's take a look if that's still here. Oh yeah, it's still here on the computer. So it's dotycoyote.com.
Yep.
And that's what you'll see when you get there. And if you start exploring these links, and I found that What's New is a good place to start.
Yeah, it's a good place.
You're very good about keeping your blog
the
current.
other good place to start is what's called resources. It gives kind of an overview of all the cultural resources over the whole website. There's 1,500 pages of stuff, including a lot of the sources that go back in the 1800s that I used. They're available as free PDFs. You know, it's been my blessing to be able to be a storyteller, and this is my way of giving back, maybe to the next generation of storytellers. Here's all the materials you need. Go with it. Keep the stories alive.
Thmoas Doty, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you, John.
And I'll just say that Tom assured me that we would not run out of content for this two-part interview, and that's certainly been the case. Now, there's so much to learn about the people who live in this region. If you want to dig deeper, we just showed you that website. So there's a rich well of information there, much insight that we've only gently touched here in this program. So as for the bonus episodes, you'll find them on my website, letscreate.org. You can contact me at letscreatepro@gmail.com. Visit my website again, letscreate.org, for all the episodes of Ramping Up Your English. You can live stream from RVTV Voices by visiting rvtv.sou.edu. Ramping Up Your English can be seen on RVTV on channels 15 in the Ashland Home Network and on channel 182 in the rest of Southern Oregon on Spectrum's Charter Cable. Now, we've seen RVTV. You get to see it too on Mondays at 8 a.m. and Thursdays at 7 p.m. I want to thank my director, Denise Ross, my talented and dedicated crew, and I want to thank you, our viewers. All of you help make this program an award winner. Join me next time for Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letts.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/roguetv. Join us next time on RVTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.